I came home for Christmas from military deployment and asked my daughter, was the $2,500 I sent each Muamacronutide enough? She looked confused. What money? My wife went pale. Her sister changed the subject. I didn't yell. I did this. There was a knock at the door. My name's Ryan Carter. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last 8.5 months in a desert that makes Death Valley look like a spa resort, patching up soldiers who thought just a scratch was an accurate medical diagnosis. U.S. Army Combat Medic at your service, which basically means I've seen more blood than a vampire convention and developed a coffee addiction that would make Starbucks shareholders weep with joy. My spine's held together by caffeine, sarcasm, and the sheer stubborn refusal to let some sand-covered hellhole break me. But after nearly 9 months of playing Dodge the Mortar Fire, and whose appendix is exploding today, I was finally coming home for Christmas. All I wanted, and I mean all I wanted in this entire godforsaken world, was to walk through my front door, see my 13-year-old daughter Mia's face light up like a Christmas tree, and hug my wife Rachel like I was trying to squeeze 8 months of missed anniversaries, birthdays, and Tuesday nights into one embrace. I'd been sending $2,500 home every single month like clockwork, making sure they had everything they needed while I was overseas playing combat surgeon in conditions that would make a MASH unit look luxurious. Bills, groceries, Mia's school supplies, maybe a nice dinner out once in a while. Whatever they needed to stay comfortable while Dad was off serving his country and questioning his life choices every time someone's intestines made an unexpected appearance. The flight home was torture. Not the good kind of torture like waiting for your birthday cake, but the special kind reserved for middle seats on military transport planes where you're crammed between a guy who hasn't discovered deodorant and another guy who thinks snoring is an Olympic sport. 15 hours of my life I'll never get back. But hey, at least nobody was shooting at me. Small victories, right? I spent most of the flight imagining the reunion. Maybe some slow motion running, emotional music swelling in the background, Mia jumping into my arms like in those manipulative homecoming videos that make you cry into your morning cereal. Hell, maybe even our dog Max would wag his tail so hard he'd achieve liftoff. Reality, as it turns out, had other plans. Reality always does, doesn't it? It's like reality sits around thinking, you know what would be hilarious? Crushing this guy's expectations like a beer can at a frat party. I walked through that front door around 3 in the afternoon on December 23rd, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, wearing my uniform because I hadn't had time to change, and honestly, I thought it might score me some extra emotional points. The house smelled weird. Not bad weird, just different. Like someone had tried to make lasagna, gave up halfway through, and decided to cover the evidence with those fancy candles that cost more than my combat boots. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, except for the part where it was completely different. New furniture. Like, really nice furniture, the kind you see in magazines where beautiful people drink wine and pretend their lives are perfect. The old couch where Mia and I used to build blanket forts? Gone. Replaced by some sleek leather monstrosity that probably cost more than my monthly salary. The awkward silence hit me before anyone said a word. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone suddenly stops talking, like you just interrupted a conversation about yourself? Yeah, that feeling, except amplified by 8 months of separation and multiplied by the weird tension crackling in the air like static electricity before a storm. And there, standing in the kitchen doorway holding a wine glass like it contained the secrets to eternal life, was my wife's sister, Lori. Lori, who I'd specifically not missed while I was overseas. Lori, whose favorite hobbies include spending other people's money and offering unsolicited life advice that nobody asked for. Ryan. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile just a little too bright, a little too forced, like someone had told her to smile for a photo but forgot to tell her eyes to participate. You're home. We weren't expecting you until tonight. Before I could respond with something witty about military transport schedules being suggestions rather than facts, I heard the sound that made every second of that miserable deployment worth it. Footsteps thundering down the stairs at a speed that violated several laws of physics. Mia crashed into me with the force of a small torpedo, her arms wrapping around my waist because apparently she'd grown while I was gone. Kids do that, turns out. They just keep growing like it's their job or something. Dad. Her voice was muffled against my chest. and I hugged her back hard enough to make up for 8.5 months of missed hugs. She smelled like that coconut shampoo she'd always loved, and something else. French fries? Oh my God, Dad, you smell like airplane and sand. It's so gross. There it was. That trademark Carter sarcasm, passed down through generations like a genetic disorder. I laughed, a real laugh, not the fake ones I'd been producing for the past 8 months, and ruffled her hair. Yeah, well, you smell like a teenager. Fair trade. She pulled back, grinning up at me, and I could see it. She looked older. Not just taller, though she definitely shot up at least 3 inches, but older in her eyes. Something had changed, and I felt that little prickle of parental concern that lives permanently in the back of every dad's brain. You got so tall. What they've been feeding you, Miracle Grow? Dad jokes already? You just got home. But she was still grinning, still holding onto my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I didn't blame her. I kind of felt the same way. We moved into the living room. This weird little procession where everyone seemed to be performing Happy Family Reunion, but nobody had bothered to rehearse their lines. Rachel kept touching her hair, Lori kept drinking her wine like it was water, and she'd just crossed the Sahara, and Mia stuck to my side like Velcro. I sat down on the new fancy couch, which, by the way, was about as comfortable as sitting on a leather-wrapped park bench, and decided to ask the question that had been nagging at me since I'd started sending money home. Hey, sweetheart, I said to Mia, keeping my voice casual, just making conversation. Was the $2,500 I sent every month enough? Did you guys have everything you needed? The room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Actually, you could probably hear a pin thinking about dropping. Mia's face scrunched up in that confused way kids do when you ask them a question in a language they don't speak. What money? 2 words. Just 2 simple words. But they hit me like a flashbang grenade in a closed room, disorienting and loud, and making everything suddenly very, very clear in the worst possible way. I watched my wife freeze mid-motion, her hand suspended in the air holding that dish towel like she'd suddenly forgotten how arms work. Lori discovered an absolutely fascinating new hobby of swirling wine in her glass and studying it like it contained the meaning of life. And me? I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a nervous smile, not even an angry smile. That dangerous kind of smile that people get right before everything goes sideways. The kind of smile that says, I'm not mad. I'm just recalculating my entire approach to this situation. The kind of smile that would have made my drill sergeant proud because it contained exactly 0 emotion and 100% controlled fury. What money? Mia repeated, looking between me and Rachel. Dad, what are you talking about? Oh, this was going to be interesting. This was going to be very, very interesting. Welcome home, Carter. Merry Christmas. Hope you like your gift-wrapped betrayal with a side of financial fraud. That night, dinner felt like a military operation gone wrong. Everyone had their assigned positions, everyone was following the script, but somehow the enemy had infiltrated our ranks, and nobody wanted to admit it. I sat at the head of the table like a soldier on recon duty, every sense heightened, watching everything while pretending to watch nothing. It's a skill you pick up in combat zones. The art of looking relaxed while cataloging every detail, every nervous twitch, every bead of sweat that shouldn't be there. Rachel had gone all out with the meal, like she was auditioning for the Food Network instead of serving dinner to her husband, who'd just discovered his bank account had been hemorrhaging money into the void. Ham, mashed potatoes, green beans that actually looked edible, rolls that were still warm, the whole Norman Rockwell painting. Except Norman Rockwell never painted a family sitting on lies thick enough to insulate a house in Alaska. Rachel kept serving food with this manic energy, like if she just kept moving, kept smiling, kept offering more gravy, then maybe nobody would notice the elephant in the room. Except the elephant wasn't just in the room. It was sitting at the table wearing a name tag that said, "Hi, I'm financial fraud." Lori, bless her wine-soaked heart, couldn't shut up. She was babbling about some absolutely amazing spa weekend she'd just had, complete with hot stone massages, seaweed wraps, and some treatment that involved putting gold on her face because apparently regular face cream is for peasants. Ryan, you wouldn't believe how rejuvenating it was, she gushed, waving her fork around like a conductor's baton. They had these incredible aromatherapy sessions, and the masseuse was from Sweden or Switzerland or one of those countries that's good at relaxation. Sounds expensive, I said, keeping my voice neutral, spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. Must have cost a pretty penny. Oh, well, Lori laughed, that high-pitched laugh that wealthy people use when they're talking about money they didn't earn. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. Self-care isn't selfish, right, Rachel? Rachel's laugh sounded like it had been produced in a factory that specializes in nervous breakdowns. Right, absolutely. Everyone deserves a little pampering now and then. Meanwhile, Mia was pushing green beans around her plate like she was trying to spell out SOS in vegetable Morse code. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that doesn't come from staying up late watching TikTok, but from actually working. "How was your shift today, honey?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer because I'd driven past the diner on my way back from the bank. Yeah, the bank, where I'd had a very interesting conversation with a very helpful teller named Marcus who'd confirmed that every single one of my deposits had cleared. "It was okay," Mia said, perking up a little. "We had this huge lunch rush because of the Christmas shopping crowd. Mrs. Patterson gave me a $20 tip just for remembering she likes extra whipped cream on her coffee." Working. I set down my fork and looked at Rachel. "Since when is our 13-year-old daughter working?" "Oh, it's just a little after-school thing," Rachel said quickly, too quickly, like she'd been preparing this answer in the mirror. "You know, teaches responsibility, work ethic. It's good for her." "Yeah," Mia chimed in, completely oblivious to the tension that was making the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "I've been doing it since September. Mom said money's been tight since you deployed, so I wanted to help out." "Janet, she's the manager. She's really nice. She let me work even though I'm technically too young, but she pays me under the table. Cash tips are awesome, Dad. Last week I made almost $80. Tight. Money's been tight. I sent $2,500 every single month for 8 months. That's $22,500. $22,500, and my daughter was bussing tables at 13 years old for cash tips, while her aunt got Swedish massages and her mother drank wine that probably cost more than Mia's weekly paycheck." I looked around the dining room, really looked at it for the first time since I'd gotten home. New furniture wasn't just limited to the living room. The dining table was different, some dark wood monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a catalog titled "Rich People Who Pretend to be Rustic." New curtains, thick, expensive ones that probably had thread counts higher than my credit score. The chandelier overhead was new too, all crystal and pretension, throwing little rainbows across the walls like it was mocking me. Through the doorway, I could see into the living room where a television the size of a small car dominated one wall. Definitely not there when I left. That thing probably had more pixels than the Hubble telescope. "Nice TV," I said conversationally, taking a bite of ham. "When do you get that?" "Oh, there was a Black Friday sale," Rachel said, not meeting my eyes. She was focused intently on cutting her ham into pieces small enough for a toddler. "Really great deal." "And the furniture? The curtains? The chandelier that looks like it came from Versailles?" I kept my tone light, friendly even, like I was just curious rather than calculating exactly how much money had been spent redecorating our house, while my kid wore shoes held together with duct tape. "Yeah, I'd noticed the shoes. Hard to miss when your daughter's footwear looks like a craft project gone wrong. We, had some home repairs," Rachel said, finally looking up at me with those big eyes that used to make me forget my own name. "You know how things pile up. The roof was leaking, and then we had to replace some drywall, and one thing led to another. We just wanted to make the house nice for when you got home. Right?" I said slowly, nodding like this made perfect sense. "Home repairs. That explains the 70-inch TV and the furniture that looks like it costs more than my truck. Because nothing says roof repair like a chandelier." Lori jumped in, probably sensing that her sister was drowning. "Ryan, you have to understand, maintaining a household while you're deployed is really stressful. Rachel's been doing an amazing job keeping everything together. You shouldn't be so." "So what?" I interrupted, still smiling. That smile was doing a lot of heavy lifting tonight. So concerned about where my money went. So curious about why my daughter's working minimum wage jobs while y'all are living like you won the lottery. So interested in basic financial accountability. The silence that fell over the table was the kind that makes you hear things you don't normally notice. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a clock somewhere in the house, Lori's breathing getting faster like she was about to hyperventilate into her wine glass. Even Mia had stopped pushing her green beans around and was looking between all of us like she'd suddenly realized she was watching a reality show unfold in real time. Dad, Mia's voice was small, uncertain. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart, I said, and that was the first lie I'd told since I got home. Everything was decidedly not fine. Everything was about as far from fine as you could get without actually being on fire. Just catching up with Mom about finances. Boring adult stuff. Rachel laughed again, that horrible manufactured sound. Yes, so boring. Ryan, you must be exhausted from your flight. Why don't we talk about this later? Yeah, I agreed, taking another bite of ham. Later sounds good. Maybe after I finish looking through the bank statements. And the credit card bills. And those receipts I saw in your drawer when I was looking for a pen earlier. If the room had been quiet before, it was now experiencing the kind of silence usually reserved for libraries during final exams and funerals. Rachel's face went through several shades of white, finally settling on ghost who just saw another ghost. Lori discovered that her wine glass was empty and suddenly needed to investigate the wine bottle in the kitchen with urgent intensity. I wasn't going to yell. Oh no, yelling was for amateurs, for people who lost control, for guys who came home from deployment and threw furniture and scared their kids. I'd seen enough of that kind of thing to know it never solved anything except making everyone miserable and traumatized. No, I was going to do this my way, calm, methodical, surgical. I was a combat medic, after all. I knew exactly how to cut deep while keeping my hands steady and my voice level. Pass the rolls, would you, honey? I asked Mia, who handed them over while staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Thanks. These are really good. Rachel, you always did make great rolls. And we finished dinner in silence, while I smiled my dangerous smile and mentally prepared for the reconnaissance mission I was about to conduct once everyone went to bed. Because if there's one thing the Army taught me, it's that you can't plan a counterattack without proper intelligence. And I was about to gather so much intelligence that the CIA would be jealous. After everyone went to bed, Rachel retreating to our bedroom with a headache she definitely wasn't faking, Lori crashing in the guest room after finishing off another bottle of wine, and Mia finally trudging upstairs after giving me a hug that lasted just a little too long. I did what every good soldier does when they suspect they've been stabbed in the back. I gathered intel. The house was quiet except for the settling sounds old houses make, those creaks and groans that used to be comforting but now sounded like accusations. I started with my phone, pulling up the banking app while sitting on that uncomfortable leather couch that probably cost more than a decent used car. The blue light from the screen illuminated my face in the dark living room, making me feel like some kind of discount detective in a noir film, except instead of investigating a murder, I was investigating the murder of my bank account. My fingers moved across the screen with the kind of precision that comes from 8 months of late-night checks to make sure the money was getting through, that my family was taken care of, that I was doing my duty as a husband and father even from 6,000 miles away. There they were, all 9 payments, lined up like soldiers at morning formation. September 15th, $2,500, transferred. October 15th, $2,500, transferred. November 15th, December 15th, January 15th. Every single month, clockwork precision, the money leaving my account and landing in our joint account like I'd programmed it to do before I deployed. $22,500 in total. I took screenshots of everything, my thumb moving mechanically across the screen, documenting the evidence like I was photographing a crime scene. Which, let's be honest, I basically was. The joint account history was even more interesting. I scrolled through months of transactions, watching my deployment money get carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey. For $1,000 to Serenity Spa and Wellness Center in October. That must have been Lori's Swedish massage extravaganza. You could pay for a semester of community college. You could feed a family for months. But sure, let's spend it on a TV so big you need to turn your head to see the whole screen. The date on the receipt was November 28th, Black Friday, just like Rachel said. Except the great deal she'd mentioned was still more expensive than my entire entertainment budget for a year. I moved to the dining room, running my hand over the new table. Solid wood, heavy as hell, probably made from trees that died of old age in some fancy forest. Under the table runner, new, by the way, probably Egyptian cotton or some nonsense. I found another receipt that had slipped between the table and the wall. Prestige Furniture Gallery, $4,200 for a rustic elegance dining collection. Rustic elegance. That's what we were calling overpriced wood now. The kitchen was next. New appliances I hadn't noticed during dinner because I'd been too focused on the verbal surgery I was performing. The coffee maker alone cost $600. It had more buttons than the cockpit of a helicopter. The knife set mounted on the wall looked like it belonged in a professional kitchen, and the price tag someone had forgotten to remove confirmed it. $850. For knives. To cut food. Food that would be eaten and turned into waste within 24 hours. But the real treasure trove was in our bedroom. I waited until I could hear Rachel's breathing settle into the deep rhythm of sleep. She always slept like the dead after wine, another thing I'd noticed since coming home. Her purse was on the dresser, and I went through it with the systematic efficiency of a customs agent who knows exactly what they're looking for. Credit card statements, folded and stuffed in the inner pocket like evidence she'd meant to destroy but never got around to. I unfolded them carefully, quietly, reading by the light of my phone. Nordstrom, $3,000 across multiple transactions. Sephora, $1,200. Some boutique called Chic and Unique, $2,000. The spa charges Lori had mentioned earlier, multiple visits, not just one, all charged to our joint credit card. Hair salon, for $100 per visit, and she'd gone 6 times. Nails, facials, something called a signature hydration treatment that cost $300 and sounded like something you'd do to a car, not a human face. Then I found the vacation brochure, tucked in her nightstand drawer under some magazines. Bora Bora, crystal clear water, overwater bungalows, the whole tropical paradise package. The brochure was well-worn, pages dog-eared, certain resorts circled in pen. On the back, in Rachel's handwriting, January trip? Maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks in Bora Bora. I did some quick mental math based on the prices listed, probably $8,000 to $10,000, maybe more with flights and meals. She was planning a vacation that cost more than some people's annual salary while Mia was buying her own school supplies. I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wake Rachel, holding that brochure like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. The moonlight coming through the window, new curtains there too, I noticed, cast shadows across the room, and I could see my reflection in the dresser mirror. I looked tired. I looked angry. I looked like a man who'd just discovered that the family he'd been fighting for didn't actually need him. They just needed his bank account. But the thing that broke something inside me, the thing that made my hands shake just slightly as I held it, was what I found in Mia's room. I checked on her first, making sure she was asleep, watching her chest rise and fall in the peaceful way only kids can sleep when they don't know their world is built on lies. Then I looked around her room with fresh eyes, really seeing it for the first time. The walls needed painting, same faded purple they'd been since she was 8. Her desk was the same one we'd bought at a garage sale 5 years ago, one leg shorter than the others, propped up with old books. The curtains had a tear in them that someone, Mia, probably, had tried to sew shut with thread that didn't quite match. Her backpack, thrown in the corner, was patched with duct tape in 3 places. But it was the shoes that killed me. Her sneakers sat by her bed, the ones she wore every day, and they were a disaster. The soles were separating from the uppers, held on by what looked like an entire roll of duct tape applied with more hope than skill. The laces were mismatched, one white, one gray, because one had broken and been replaced with whatever was available. There were holes in the canvas where her toes had worn through, and someone had colored over them with a Sharpie to make them less obvious. I picked them up, these pathetic excuses for shoes, and sat on the floor of my daughter's room holding them like they were made of glass. My daughter, my baby girl, was walking around in shoes that looked like they'd been through a war while her mother drove a leased luxury car and her aunt got hot stone massages. I sat there trying not to curse, trying not to scream, trying not to wake up the whole house with the rage that was building in my chest like a pressure cooker about to explode. Instead, I whispered into the darkness of my daughter's room, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Nice job, soldier. Real nice job. You fought for your country, dodged bullets, patched up kids who stepped on IEDs, missed your daughter's entire 8th grade year. And for what? So your wife could play Real Housewives with your combat pay." I took pictures of everything. The shoes, the patched backpack, the old desk, the torn curtains. Then I went back downstairs, logged into every account we had, and downloaded 9 months of statements. Credit cards, bank accounts, even the utility bills to see what was real and what was bullshit. It took 2 hours, and by the time I was done, I had enough evidence to prosecute a fraud case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. The sun was starting to come up when I finally sat back on that expensive leather couch, my laptop open in front of me, surrounded by printed documents that told the story of betrayal in numbers and receipts. I wasn't tired. I was beyond tired, into that weird state where exhaustion circles back around to clarity. And I was crystal clear about one thing. This wasn't going to end quietly. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a crick in my neck that felt like someone had replaced my spine with a rusty spring, surrounded by printed bank statements and receipts that told a story better than any fiction writer could manage. Rachel was already up, moving around the kitchen with the kind of manic energy that comes from knowing you're guilty, but hoping enthusiasm can somehow erase evidence. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the house. She was pulling out all the stops, cooking breakfast like June Cleaver on steroids, probably hoping that if she just acted normal enough, I'd forget about the $22,000 that had evaporated into luxury goods and spa treatments. Morning, she said too brightly when she saw me gathering up my evidence pile. I made your favorite. Bacon, scrambled eggs, those hash browns you like. Thought we could all have a nice family breakfast before Mia's shift. Shift. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. My 13-year-old daughter had a shift at a diner because money was tight, while her mother cooked breakfast in a kitchen full of appliances that cost more than a semester of college. Actually, I said, stretching my neck and wincing at the sound it made. I thought I'd drive Mia to work today, spend some quality time with her, see where she's been working all these months. Rachel's smile flickered like a light bulb about to die. Oh, that's not necessary. I usually drop her off on my way to. On your way to where? I interrupted, genuinely curious. What exactly have you been doing while I've been deployed, Rachel? Besides redecorating and planning vacations to Bora Bora. She dropped the spatula, just straight up dropped it on the floor, where it landed with a clatter that probably woke up Lori in the guest room. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't, I said, smiling that smile again. We'll talk later. Right now, I'm taking my daughter to work. Mia came downstairs 20 minutes later, wearing jeans that were too short. She'd grown out of them, but was still wearing them because apparently buying new clothes wasn't in the budget. And those tragic duct-taped shoes that made me want to punch a wall. She grabbed a piece of bacon, kissed Rachel on the cheek with the kind of automatic affection kids give their parents, and bounded out to my truck like this was just another normal day. Like her dad hadn't just discovered that her childhood was being funded by grease-stained tips instead of his deployment pay. The diner was called Rosie's, one of those classic American establishments that looked like it had been serving coffee and disappointment since the 1950s. Red vinyl booths, a counter with spinning stools, a jukebox in the corner that probably hadn't worked since Reagan was president. It was 7:30 in the morning, and the place was already packed with the Sunday breakfast crowd. Families after church, elderly couples reading newspapers, construction workers fueling up before their shifts. Mia waved at everyone like she was running for mayor. Hey, Mr. Patterson. Mrs. Chun, your usual table's open. Tommy, your mom said you're supposed to order oatmeal, not pancakes. She moved through that diner with confidence, tying on her apron, which had her name embroidered on it, meaning she'd been here long enough for them to make it permanent, and grabbing order pads like she'd been doing this for years instead of months. I sat at the counter, ordered coffee that came in a mug big enough to be a weapon, and watched my daughter work. She was good at it too. Remembering orders without writing them down, chatting with customers like they were old friends, balancing plates up her arm like a circus performer. She looked happy, which somehow made it worse. My kid had found purpose and pride in minimum wage work because her mother had decided that Swedish massages were more important than providing for her daughter. The manager came out from the kitchen, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a bun and the kind of face that had seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. Her name tag said Janet, and she moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd been running a diner since before I was born. She poured herself a coffee, leaned against the counter next to me, and watched Mia deliver a stack of pancakes to a table of teenagers. You must be Ryan, she said without looking at me. Mia talks about you all the time. Shows everyone pictures. My dad's a hero, she says. He's overseas saving lives. The coffee suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. How long has she been working here, Janet? Started in September, right after school started. Came in asking if we needed help. Said her mom was struggling with bills and she wanted to contribute. Broke my heart, honestly. 13-year-old kid shouldn't have to worry about bills. Janet finally looked at me, and her eyes were sharp, assessing. I've been some rules hiring her. She's technically too young. But I figured better she works somewhere safe where I can keep an eye on her than somewhere that might take advantage. Plus, she's a damn good worker. Better than some adults I've hired. Did she ever mention money I was sending home? I asked, gripping my coffee mug hard enough that my knuckles went white. $2,500 a month. Janet's eyebrows shot up so fast they nearly left her face. 2,500? Every month. She set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. Mr. Carter, that child has been buying her own shoes, her own school supplies, bringing her own lunch because she said the cafeteria was too expensive. Last month she came in crying because she needed a winter coat and couldn't afford one, so I gave her my daughter's old one. $2,500. Her voice had gotten louder, sharp enough that a few customers glanced over. Where the hell has that money been going? That, I said quietly, is an excellent question. Mind if I ask you a few more things about Mia's time here? We talked for 20 minutes while I nursed my coffee and watched my daughter work. Janet told me everything. How Mia had missed school the day after Thanksgiving because she'd picked up a double shift to save money for Christmas presents. How she'd come in with a fever in October but refused to go home because she needed the money for new sneakers. How she'd been putting away $10 from every shift into a jar she kept in her locker, saving up for something she wouldn't tell anyone about. How she'd been Employee of the Month twice, which was unheard of for someone so young, because she worked harder than people 3 times her age. She's a good kid, Janet said, and there was genuine affection in her voice. Too good. No 13-year-old should be that worried about money. I thought you guys were genuinely struggling. Thought maybe you'd been injured or weren't getting paid properly or something. $2,500 a month. Jesus Christ, that's more than I clear some months. A customer called for Janet, and she excused herself, but not before giving me a look that said she'd put together exactly what was happening and didn't approve one bit. I sat there at that counter, watching Mia laugh with a table of elderly women who were probably tipping her in quarters and telling her she reminded them of their granddaughters, and something cold and hard settled in my chest. When Mia's break came, 10 minutes that she spent scribbling homework at a corner booth while scarfing down free fries, I slid into the seat across from her. She looked up, surprised, a French fry hanging out of her mouth like a cigarette. Dad, you're still here? Yeah, kiddo, I'm still here. I reached across the table and took her hand, those small fingers that were getting calluses from carrying heavy plates. Why didn't you tell me you were working? When we talked on the phone, when I asked how things were, why didn't you say anything? She shrugged, that universal teenager gesture that means everything and nothing. I didn't want you to worry. You were already dealing with, like, war and stuff. Mom said you had enough on your plate without stressing about things at home. And honestly, Dad, I like working here. Janet's awesome, the customers are mostly nice, and I'm saving up for this really cool guitar I saw at the music store. Plus, it's kind of cool having my own money, you know? Makes me feel grown up. What about the money I was sending home? I kept my voice gentle, but I needed to hear it from her. Did Mom ever mention that? Mia looked confused again, that same expression from last night. Dad, what money? Mom's been saying since you left that we needed to tighten our belts, that deployment pay isn't much, and we had to be careful. She said you were sending what you could, but it was barely covering basics. She squeezed my hand, her face earnest. I know it's expensive over there, and you're not making much, so I wanted to help. That's why I got the job. I'm not mad about it, or anything. I'm glad I can contribute. Not making much, barely covering basics. I'd been sending enough money to comfortably support a family of 3, and my wife had convinced our daughter that we were practically broke. That I was practically broke. That she needed to sacrifice her childhood to help support a household that was already being supported. Sweetheart, I said carefully, I've been sending $2,500 home every single month. That's on top of my regular salary that goes into our account. You shouldn't have had to work. You should have been focusing on school, on being a kid, on buying whatever guitar you wanted without spending months saving up for it. Mia stared at me like I'd just told her Santa Claus was real and living in our basement. 2,500? Every month? Dad, that's... She started doing the math in her head, her eyes getting wider. That's like over $20,000. Or did it? She stopped, and I watched her face change as she figured it out. Kids aren't stupid. They pick up on things faster than we give them credit for. The new furniture. The car Mom's been driving. That huge TV. Yeah, I said. That's where it went. Her face went through several emotions. Confusion, hurt, anger, and then something that looked like embarrassment. So I've been working for nothing? Mom let me miss homework and lose sleep and stress about money when there was money the whole time. Her voice cracked a little. Dad, I asked her 3 times if we could afford new shoes, and she said maybe next month. I've been wearing these since August. She gestured at her duct-taped sneakers, and now there were tears in her eyes. Why would she do that? That was the question, wasn't it? Why would a mother let her daughter struggle when there was no need? I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 13-year-old, so I just squeezed her hand and said, I don't know, baby, but I'm going to find out. We hit Target first because I'm not made of money. Ironic statement considering I'd just discovered 22 grand had vanished into the consumer goods black hole, and Mia needed basics before we got fancy. 3 pairs of actual sneakers that didn't require duct tape or prayer to stay intact. Jeans that fit her current height, instead of the height she was 6 months ago. A proper winter coat that wasn't a hand-me-down from Janet's daughter, and enough socks and underwear to last her until she graduated high school. The look on her face when I told her to grab whatever she needed without checking price tags. That was worth every penny of my deployment pay that had actually gone where it was supposed to go. Dad, this coat is $60. She whispered, holding up a North Face jacket like it was made of gold. That's like 2 shifts at the diner. Mia, I make more than $60 getting shot at by people who don't appreciate my medical expertise. Get the coat. Get 2 coats. Get a coat for every day of the week if you want. I tossed a pack of thermal shirts into the cart. From now on, you're not comparing prices to shift wages because you're not working shifts anymore. You're 13. Your job is school, homework, and being a kid. My job is making sure you can do those things without worrying about whether your shoes are going to disintegrate mid-hallway. She got the coat, and the boots, and the hoodie she'd been eyeing but didn't think she needed. By the time we left Target, we dropped $400 and Mia looked like she'd won the lottery. Next stop was the music store, a local place called Melodies that smelled like wood polish and dreams, where a guitar she'd been visiting like a shrine for 3 months sat in the window. Acoustic, sunburst finish, the kind that looked like it belonged in a coffee shop where people wore turtlenecks and talked about their feelings. The owner, a guy named Rick with more tattoos than skin and a ponytail that hadn't been fashionable since Nirvana was touring, recognized Mia immediately. Hey kiddo, come to visit your girlfriend again. He gestured at the guitar. She's still waiting for you. Haven't let anyone else touch her. We're not visiting today, Rick, I said, pulling out my credit card. We're adopting. Ring us up and throw in a case, some pics, and whatever else she needs to actually play the thing. Rick's face broke into a grin that probably violated several dental health guidelines. My man, Mia, you didn't tell me your dad was cool. I didn't know he was this cool, Mia said, and she was crying again, happy tears this time, hugging that guitar like it was a life preserver. Dad, this is too much. The clothes and the shoes and now this. It's not too much. It's what should have been happening all along. I signed the receipt. Another $300 that hurt way less than knowing my kid had been rationing lunch money, and watched her cradle that guitar like a newborn. Besides, now you can start that band you've been talking about. What were you going to call it? Duct Tape Rebellion? She laughed, that genuine Mia laugh I hadn't heard since I got home. That was one time I mentioned it, and I was joking. Well, now you've got the guitar to make it happen. No excuses. We loaded everything into my truck, bags and boxes, and one extremely happy teenager, and I drove us home with a sense of purpose that felt a lot like the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. Because tonight was Christmas Eve dinner, and Rachel had invited her whole family over like this was going to be some Norman Rockwell painting instead of the financial crime scene it actually was. Her parents, her sister Lori, even her brother Marcus, who I actually liked, but who was about to get a front row seat to a show he didn't buy tickets for. Perfect. The audience was assembling. Time to set the stage. When we got home, Rachel's car, The least one that cost 6 grand of my deployment money was in the driveway along with Lori's Mercedes and her parents' Lexus. The whole gang was here early, probably to strategize about how to handle me now that I'd figured out their little embezzlement scheme. I helped Mia carry her bags upstairs, watching her lay out her new clothes on her bed like they were museum pieces, and then I went to my office, the spare bedroom that Rachel had wanted to turn into a yoga studio, but I'd claimed before deployment, and got to work. I printed everything. Every bank statement, every receipt I'd photographed, every credit card bill, every single piece of evidence that told the story of how my family's support money had turned into a shopping spree. The printer hummed like it was judging everyone involved, spitting out page after page of financial documentation that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. I organized it chronologically, highlighted the important bits in yellow, a color I chose specifically because it looks like a warning sign, and put it all in a neat folder labeled Family Financial Review, December 2024 to 2025. Downstairs, I could hear the family gathering. Laughter, wine bottles opening, the sound of Rachel's mother complaining about traffic like anyone cared. I waited. Patience is a virtue, and I'd spent 8 months in a combat zone learning to wait for exactly the right moment to act. This wasn't about revenge. Okay, maybe it was a little about revenge, but mostly it was about making sure this never happened again. About making sure Mia never had to choose between buying lunch and buying notebooks. About making sure my wife and her family understood that lying to a soldier about his kids' welfare was the kind of mistake you only make once. I came downstairs around 6, right when Rachel was pulling a ham out of the oven that probably cost more than Mia's monthly diner earnings. Everyone was in the dining room, that overpriced rustic elegance monstrosity, looking like a Ralph Lauren ad for families who vacation in the Hamptons. Rachel's dad, Tom, was wearing a sweater that screamed, "I have a boat." Her mom, Patricia, was dripping in jewelry that probably cost more than my truck. Marcus was on his phone, probably texting his wife to save him from family drama. And Lori was already on her second glass of wine, because apparently staying sober through dinner was for quitters. "Ryan," Tom boomed, standing up to shake my hand with the kind of enthusiasm that rich people use when they're pretending to relate to the working class. "Good to have you home, son. Rachel's been telling us all about your deployment. Sounds rough." "Yeah, rough," I agreed, shaking his hand and smiling. That smile, the one that should have warned them all to run. "But I'm home now, and we've got a lot to catch up on. Family stuff, financial stuff, the kind of stuff that makes for interesting dinner conversation." Rachel went pale. Lori suddenly found her wine glass fascinating. Patricia dabbed at her lipstick nervously. Marcus, bless him, was still on his phone and had no idea he was about to witness a bloodbath. "Well, let's eat first," Rachel said quickly. Too quickly, serving ham with hands that shook just enough to notice. "Everyone must be starving. Mom, you want sweet potatoes? Dad, green beans." We sat down, this bizarre tableau of family dysfunction dressed up in holiday cheer, and I played along. I complimented the ham, praised the mashed potatoes, made small talk about the weather and traffic, and all the meaningless garbage people discuss when they're avoiding the elephant in the room. Except the elephant wasn't just in the room. It was sitting at the table wearing my face and waiting for dessert. "So Ryan," Patricia said, because she couldn't help herself, "what are your plans now that you're back? Will you be deploying again, or are you staying stateside?" "That depends," I said, cutting my ham with precision. "On a lot of factors. Financial factors, mostly. See, the Army pays pretty well, especially with deployment bonuses and hazard pay. I've been sending money home to make sure my family was taken care of while I was gone. $2,500 a month, in fact." The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people enjoying a meal, but the tense quiet of people realizing they're trapped in a room with someone who knows all their secrets. "That's very generous," Tom said carefully. "Shows real dedication to your family." "I thought so too," I agreed. Which is why I was surprised to find out my daughter's been working at a diner since September, because apparently money's been tight. I used air quotes. I'd never used air quotes before in my life, but the situation seemed to demand it. Real tight. So tight she's been wearing shoes held together with duct tape and skipping lunch to save money. Rachel dropped her fork. Lori reached for the wine bottle. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, sensing blood in the water. "Now, I'm not a financial expert. I continued, my voice conversational, friendly even, but I did some math. $2,500 a month for 9 months. Well, 8.5 if we're being precise. Comes out to about $22,500. That's a lot of money. Should have been more than enough to, I don't know, buy a 13-year-old some shoes that don't require emergency room-level triage. Ryan, Rachel started, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. See, I spent last night doing reconnaissance. That's military speak for investigating. And I found some interesting things. Receipts, mostly. Credit card statements. Lease agreements. I smiled at Lori. Spa memberships. Vacation brochures. A car that costs more per month than some people's rent. It's fascinating, really, how $22,000 can just evaporate when you're not paying attention. I stood up, excused myself, and went to grab my folder from the office. When I came back, everyone was frozen like I'd hit pause on a movie. I placed the folder next to my plate, nice and neat, like it was just another dinner accessory. "What's that?" Patricia asked, though her voice suggested she knew exactly what it was. "Tonight's entertainment," I said cheerfully. "We're going to play a fun game I invented called Where Did Daddy's Money Go?" Spoiler alert. I opened the folder and pulled out the first receipt, placing it on the table like a card dealer in Vegas. It didn't go to his daughter. By the time dessert was supposed to hit the table, some elaborate cheesecake situation that Rachel had probably spent half a day making to prove she was still a good wife. Everyone was so tense you could have used the atmosphere to power a small electrical grid. I stood there at the head of the table, folder in hand, feeling like a prosecuting attorney about to deliver the closing argument that would send everyone to white-collar prison. Except this wasn't a courtroom. This was my dining room, and the jury was my wife's family who were all starting to realize they'd been accessories to fraud. I raised my glass of wine, the expensive stuff Lori had brought, probably bought with my money, and cleared my throat. "I'd like to make another toast," I announced, and the look Rachel gave me could have frozen the sun. "To family, to honesty, to transparency, and to the fascinating journey of $22,500 as it made its way from a combat zone in the Middle East to various luxury retailers across suburban America." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the kind of movement rich people make when they're used to buying their way out of awkward situations but can't figure out how to Venmo their way out of this one. "Ryan, perhaps this isn't the time." "Oh, this is exactly the time," I interrupted, smiling that smile that had gotten me through 8 months of not punching people who deserved it. Christmas Eve, family gathered, everyone pretending everything's fine. It's perfect. Very festive. Really captures the spirit of the season. I pulled out the first document from my folder, a bank statement with 9 deposits highlighted in yellow like a roadmap of betrayal. Let's start with the basics. September through May, $2,500 deposited on the 15th of each month. Clockwork. Military precision. Pun intended. I placed it on the table in front of Rachel's parents. Tom picked it up with the kind of reluctance you'd use to handle a live snake. Patricia leaned over to look, her jewelry clinking like wind chimes of guilt. "Now here's where it gets interesting," I continued, pulling out receipt after receipt, laying them out like a magician doing a card trick, except instead of pulling rabbits out of hats, I was pulling evidence of financial exploitation out of folders. $4,000 to Serenity Spa and Wellness Center. That's a lot of serenity, Lori. Did you achieve enlightenment, or did you just get really good at spending other people's money? Lori's face went from wine flush pink to Christmas lights red. "Ryan, I can explain." "Oh, please do," I said, gesturing for her to continue. "I'm dying to hear how Swedish massages and hot stone therapy were essential expenses while my daughter was putting duct tape on her shoes. This should be good. Marcus, you got popcorn? This is better than Netflix." Marcus, who had the good sense to look horrified by this whole situation, held up his hands. "Man, I had no idea any of this was happening. I thought you guys were doing fine." Rachel said. Rachel said a lot of things, I interrupted, turning to my wife who looked like she wanted the expensive new floor to open up and swallow her whole. She told Mia that money was tight. She told Mia that I wasn't making much overseas. She told Mia that we needed to tighten our belts. Meanwhile, I pulled out the car lease agreement. She was leasing a BMW. A BMW, Rachel. Our daughter was bussing tables for $5 an hour plus tips while you were driving around in a car that costs $600 a month. It was a good deal, Rachel whispered, and even she seemed to realize how stupid that sounded the moment it left her mouth. A good deal, I repeated slowly, like I was testing out the words in a foreign language. A good deal. You know what else is a good deal? Shoes that don't require emergency surgery to stay attached to your feet. School supplies that don't come from the clearance bin at the Dollar Tree. A winter coat that isn't a hand-me-down from someone else's kid. Those are fantastic deals, Rachel. Real bargains. But I guess they weren't as appealing as a luxury car and a 70-inch TV. I pulled out the Best Buy receipt next, slapping it down on the table hard enough to make the wine glasses rattle. $6,800 for a television. $6,800. That's almost 3 months of the money I sent home for Mia. 3 months. Do you know what Mia was doing for those 3 months? Working double shifts on weekends, missing homework deadlines because she was exhausted, lying to her teachers about why she couldn't afford the field trip to the Science Museum because she was too embarrassed to admit her family was struggling. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth like this was some kind of shocking revelation instead of something they'd probably all known about and ignored. Mia was working? Rachel, you didn't tell us Mia was working. Because she knew it would look bad. I said before Rachel could formulate whatever lie she was cooking up. Because even in a family that apparently thinks embezzlement is a team sport, there's a line, and making a 13-year-old work to pay for basic necessities while you're planning a vacation to Bora Bora crosses it. I pulled out the vacation brochure last, worn from Rachel's constant handling, her handwriting still visible on the back, where she'd circled the most expensive resorts. January trip, question mark, question mark, question mark, maybe 2 weeks. I read aloud. That's what you wrote, Rachel. 2 weeks in Bora Bora. Overwater bungalows, private beaches, the whole Instagram influencer fantasy. Estimated cost based on the resorts you circled, somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. That's almost half of what I sent home for Mia. Half. For a vacation. The silence that followed was the kind you experience right before an explosion, that moment when the world holds its breath and waits for the inevitable destruction. Rachel was crying now, quiet tears that smudged her mascara and made her look like a sad raccoon. Lori had abandoned her wine glass entirely and was just staring at the table like it contained the secrets of the universe. Tom looked like he was calculating how much money it would take to make this problem go away. And Patricia was doing that thing wealthy women do where they dab at their eyes without actually producing tears. I can't believe this, Patricia finally said, and she was looking at Rachel with the kind of disappointment that usually precedes being written out of a will. Rachel, how could you? That money was for Mia, for your daughter, and you spent it on furniture and cars and spa days. It wasn't like that, Rachel said weakly, but her heart wasn't in it. You can't really defend the indefensible, and she was smart enough to know it. Things just got out of hand. One purchase led to another, and I kept thinking I'd make it up, that I'd replace the money before Ryan got home. That Mia didn't really need. Didn't really need what? I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Didn't really need shoes? Food. A childhood where she wasn't constantly stressed about money? What exactly didn't she need, Rachel? Because from where I'm standing, the only thing she didn't need was a mother who valued a BMW over her daughter's well-being. Marcus, who had been remarkably quiet through this whole thing, finally spoke up. Rachel, Jesus Christ. I knew you liked nice things, but this is insane. That kid's been working? She's 13. I thought you were. I mean, Ryan sent money. Why would she need to work? Because I told her we were struggling, Rachel admitted, and at least she had the decency to look ashamed. I told her Ryan's deployment pay wasn't much, that we needed to be careful with money. I thought if she believed we were struggling, she wouldn't ask for things, wouldn't expect to be taken care of by her own mother. I finished. Yeah, mission accomplished on that one. She expected so little that she got a job at 13 to help support a family that didn't actually need supporting. Congratulations, Rachel. Parent of the Year. Really stellar work. Lori tried to interject, her voice slurred from wine and guilt. Ryan, you have to understand, we didn't think. I turned to her, and she shrank back like I'd pulled a weapon. Lori. So this was a group effort? The whole family knew? Everyone was in on lying to a soldier about his daughter's welfare, while they divvied up his deployment pay like it was a lottery win. I didn't know about Mia working, Lori protested. Rachel said you guys were fine, that the money you sent was enough. that she was just what? Just treating herself? Just investing in self-care? Just committing fraud? I pulled out more receipts, a whole stack of them, months of purchases that added up to more money than most families saw in a year. Nordstrom, $3,000. Sephora, $1,200. Some boutique called Chic and Unique, $2,000. Hair salon, for $100 per visit, 6 visits. That's $2,400 on hair. Lori, my daughter was eating free day-old fries at a diner while you were getting highlights that cost more than her monthly wages. Tom stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a scream. That's enough. Ryan, we understand you're upset, but this family meeting you're having, it's not appropriate. We should discuss this privately, calmly, like adults. Privately. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. Tom, your daughter spent my money for 8 months. Your other daughter helped spend it. You've been eating dinners at this table, sitting on this furniture, watching this TV, all paid for with money that was supposed to keep my kid fed and clothed. You don't get to tell me what's appropriate. You lost that privilege around the same time Rachel decided a spa membership was more important than our daughter's shoes. We'll pay you back, Patricia said suddenly, desperately. Every penny. We'll sell things we'll. Oh, you'll definitely pay me back, I agreed. But we're not done yet. See, the thing about being in the military is you learn about protocol, about following procedures, about documentation. I pulled out one more document from my folder, this one official looking with a government seal at the top. This is interesting. It's from the Judge Advocate General's office, JAG, for those of you not familiar with military legal divisions. Turns out, when you misuse a deployed service member's pay that's designated for dependent care, Uncle Sam gets curious. Real curious. Rachel's face went from pale to transparent. You reported us to the military? I requested an inquiry. I corrected. Just asking questions, seeing what my options are. Turns out, financial exploitation of a service member's family support payments is taken pretty seriously. There are regulations, laws even. Who knew? Right then, like I'd scripted it, which I absolutely had, there was a knock at the door. Perfect timing. I'd always had good timing. I walked to the door calmly, like I wasn't enjoying this moment more than I'd enjoyed anything in months, and opened it to find Major Hastings standing there in full dress uniform, holding a sealed manila envelope. Sir, he said formally, handing me the envelope. You requested these documents. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Major, I replied, taking the envelope. Perfect timing, as always. I turned back to the dining room, where everyone had frozen like someone had hit pause on their collective panic attack. I held up the envelope, waving it slightly. This is from the JAG Legal Division. It's a formal notice of inquiry into potential financial exploitation of a dependent. You see, when you use a soldier's pay that's meant for his kid to fund your facelift fund and your luxury car collection, Uncle Sam gets a little curious about whether laws were broken. Federal laws. The kind with actual consequences. The room went so quiet I could hear Patricia's jewelry clinking as she trembled. Rachel was full-on sobbing now. Lori looked like she was going to throw up. Tom had sat back down and was gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. Now, relax, I said, and my voice was almost kind. Almost. I'm not pressing charges. Yet. Consider this envelope a Christmas gift, the gift of reflection, of consequences, of understanding that actions have repercussions. Merry Christmas, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your ham. Right then, as if on cue, because I'd absolutely orchestrated this moment down to the minute, someone knocked at the door. The sound cut through the tension like a church bell at a funeral, and everyone's head whipped toward the entrance like they were watching a tennis match. I set down my folder, smiled that dangerous smile one more time, and walked to the door with the casual confidence of a man who'd just played his trump card and knew the game was over. Major Hastings stood on my porch in full dress uniform, the kind that makes civilians stand up straighter and question their life choices. He was holding a sealed manila envelope with enough official-looking stamps and seals to make a lawyer nervous. We'd served together in Iraq, and he owed me a favor after I'd patched up his leg when an IED turned his convoy route into a demolition derby. I'd called in that favor yesterday. Sir, he said, his voice carrying that military formality that sounds like authority incarnate. You requested these documents. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, mostly paper, partly justice. Perfect timing, Major. Appreciate you coming out on Christmas Eve. Wouldn't miss it, he said, and there was the ghost of a smile on his face. Merry Christmas, Carter. Give him hell. Already on it, I replied, and closed the door. When I turned back to the dining room, it was like walking into a wax museum exhibit titled Financial Fraud Meets Military Justice. Nobody moved. Rachel's face had gone beyond pale into some new color that didn't exist in nature. Lori's wine glass was frozen halfway to her mouth. Tom looked like he was calculating the cost of hiring a legal team. Patricia was clutching her pearls, literally clutching them, like they were prayer beads. Marcus had his phone out, probably Googling military fraud penalties under the table. I walked back to my seat, set the envelope down next to my evidence folder, and let the silence stretch like taffy. The longer I waited, the more they squirmed. It was beautiful in a petty, vindictive sort of way. So, I said finally, tapping the envelope. This is from the Judge Advocate General's office. JAG, for those of you who skipped the military alphabet soup portion of dinner. It's a formal notice of inquiry into financial exploitation of a dependent. Turns out, and this surprised me too, when you use a deployed soldier's family support payments to buy luxury cars and spa packages while his kid is rationing lunch money, the United States military gets interested. Real interested. Ryan, please, Rachel started, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. See, there are actual regulations about this. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, for starters. Financial exploitation of military families is a federal offense under certain circumstances. There's also potential state-level fraud charges, misuse of funds, possibly even child neglect, depending on how creative the prosecutor wants to get. I was making some of this up, stretching the truth like Lori stretched my bank account, but they didn't know that. The military takes care of its own, Rachel. And right now, they're very curious about why my deployment pay ended up funding a lifestyle instead of protecting my daughter. Lori finally found her voice, though it came out like a squeak. But we didn't know it was illegal. We just thought. You just thought what? That lying to a 13-year-old about her family's finances while spending her father's combat pay was totally cool? That there wouldn't be consequences? I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, pulling out the papers inside. They were mostly blank forms, information requests, nothing actually incriminating, but they looked official enough to scare people who'd never dealt with military bureaucracy. These are preliminary investigation documents. They want bank statements, receipts, testimony from witnesses. That'd be people like Janet from the diner, Mia's teachers who noticed she couldn't afford field trips, maybe even Mia herself. Rachel was sobbing now, the kind of crying that comes with snot and hiccups and complete loss of dignity. Please don't do this. Don't drag Mia into this. She doesn't need to know. She already knows, I interrupted. We went shopping today, bought her actual shoes, clothes that fit, that guitar she's been saving for. Had a nice long talk about where Daddy's money actually went. She's upstairs right now, probably trying to process the fact that her mother lied to her for 8 months. So yes, she knows. Tom cleared his throat, trying to salvage some authority. What do you want, Ryan? Money? We'll pay back every cent. We'll sell the car, cancel the spa membership, whatever it takes. Just tell us what you want. What did I want? That was the question, wasn't it? I looked around the table at these people who'd treated my deployment pay like a communal credit card, who'd watched my daughter struggle and did nothing, who'd lied and spent and justified it all with whatever mental gymnastics let them sleep at night. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and cold. Full repayment. Every single dollar, with interest. The car gets returned. I don't care if there's a penalty, pay it. Lori, your spa membership? Canceled. You can get a refund or eat the cost, your choice. That vacation to Bora Bora? Never happening. Rachel's credit cards? Frozen until this is paid back. And all the money, all of it, goes into a trust account for Mia. Not a joint account. Not a savings account Rachel has access to. A trust account under my supervision that can only be used for Mia's actual needs. That's reasonable, Marcus said quickly, probably trying to prevent this from escalating further. We can do that. Set up a payment plan, make monthly installments. Weekly installments, I corrected. And if you miss one payment, if you're even a day late, I file these documents and let JAG sort it out. I'm not bluffing. I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by making sure this never happens to another military family. Patricia was nodding frantically. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. Rachel, honey, we'll help you. We'll figure this out. There's one more thing, I said, looking directly at Rachel. I'm moving out. Taking Mia with me. I've already looked at apartments. Found a nice two-bedroom place near her school. We'll figure out custody arrangements through lawyers, but she's coming with me. You can have visitation, supervised at first, because right now I don't trust you to put her needs above your shopping addiction. You can't take my daughter, Rachel whispered, but there was no fight in it. She knew she'd lost. Watch me, I said. I've got 8 months of evidence showing neglect, financial abuse, and lying to a minor. Any judge would give me custody in a heartbeat. So yeah, I can take her. And I will. Because unlike you, I actually give a damn about her well-being more than I care about having nice furniture. The room fell silent again. This time, nobody tried to argue. They'd been beaten, and they knew it. I stood up, gathered my folder and envelope, and looked at each of them in turn. Merry Christmas, everyone. Enjoy your ham. I'm going upstairs to tell my daughter we're moving out tomorrow. Oh, and Rachel? The movers are coming at 9 a.m. They'll pack up Mia's stuff and anything I left here. Don't try to stop them. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, leaving behind a table full of people who'd just learned an expensive lesson about the consequences of betrayal. Behind me, I could hear crying, arguing, Patricia yelling at Rachel about how she'd raised her better than this. But I didn't care anymore. I had evidence, I had a plan, and most importantly, I had my daughter's trust back. And that was worth more than all their luxury purchases combined. 2 days after Christmas, after the most awkward holiday in human history where Mia and I spent the day in a hotel eating takeout Chinese food and watching bad movies, we had our family meeting. Not the dinner table ambush kind, but the real deal. Lawyers, mediators, and consequences. I'd arranged it through a JAG attorney named Mr. Benson, a guy who looked like someone's disappointed grandfather and had the patience of a monk who'd achieved enlightenment through dealing with military family disputes. We met at his office, a bland conference room with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look guilty even if they weren't. Rachel sat on one side of the table with her parents flanking her like bodyguards, except bodyguards are supposed to protect you from external threats, not from the consequences of your own actions. Lori sat next to them, looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. Marcus had declined to attend, texting me that he didn't sign up for this circus, and honestly, I respected that. Mr. Benson sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents that would make a tax auditor weep with joy. I sat across from Rachel with my own lawyer, a civilian attorney named Patricia Chun who specialized in military family law and had a reputation for eviscerating people who exploited service members. She'd taken one look at my evidence and said, "Oh, we're going to destroy them," which was exactly the energy I needed. "Let's begin," Mr. Benson said, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of authority. "Mr. Carter has provided substantial evidence of financial misappropriation of funds designated for dependent care during his deployment. We're here to reach a resolution that satisfies all parties and, most importantly, protects the minor child involved." He opened the first folder, and I watched Rachel's face crumble as he laid out the evidence systematically. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every purchase that proved she'd turned our daughter's welfare fund into a personal shopping account. Tom kept trying to interrupt with excuses. She didn't understand. It was poor judgment. This could happen to anyone. But Mr. Benson shut him down with the kind of look that makes you remember every time you disappointed your parents. "Mrs. Carter," he said, looking directly at Rachel, "can you explain why you informed your daughter that finances were difficult while spending approximately $22,500 on luxury items?" Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know. It just happened. I saw the money in the account, and I thought we could afford things. Nice things. Things we never had before. I didn't think about, I knew Mia was working, but I thought it was good for her. Building character. Character," I repeated flatly. "Our 13-year-old daughter was building character by working for minimum wage while you built a luxury car collection. That's an interesting parenting philosophy." "Mr. Carter," Mr. Benson said gently, though I could see approval in his eyes. "Let's focus on resolution. Mrs. Carter has admitted misuse of funds. The question now is restitution and ensuring this doesn't happen again." Patricia Chin slid a document across the table. We're proposing full repayment of $22,500 plus 6% interest annually. That's standard for financial damages. Total comes to $23,850 to be paid in weekly installments of $450 over approximately 1 year. Tom choked. $450 a week? That's nearly $2,000 a month. That's less than Mr. Carter was sending while being shotted overseas. Patricia replied coolly. I think you can manage it. Alternatively, we can pursue this through military and civilian courts, where penalties and legal fees would substantially exceed this amount. The room fell silent. Checkmate. Fine, Tom finally said. We'll pay it. Where does the money go? Into a trust account for Mia Carter, Mr. Benson said, sliding another document forward. Mr. Carter will be trustee. Funds can only be used for Mia's education, medical expenses, and necessary living costs. Mrs. Carter will have no access. Rachel started crying again. You're cutting me off from my own daughter's money? You cut yourself off when you spend it on a BMW, I said. This isn't punishment, Rachel. This is protection, proving you can't be trusted with money meant for Mia's welfare. Lori finally spoke up, her voice shaky. What about the spa membership? I can't just cancel. There's a contract. Read the contract, Patricia said. There's usually a hardship clause. Financial hardship, which you're about to experience if you don't figure out how to come up with your share of this repayment. My share? Lori's voice pitched higher. I didn't take the money from the account. No, but you benefited from it, I said, pulling out the highlighted spa receipts. $4,000 worth of benefits. Your sister used money meant for my daughter to pay for your relaxation. You're complicit. You knew she was spending money we supposedly didn't have. You could have said something. You didn't. Mr. Benson nodded. Miss Whitman, you received approximately $4,000 in benefits from misappropriated funds. We recommend you contribute proportionally to the restitution, roughly 18% of the total. Lori looked at her father desperately. Tom's face had gone from angry to resigned to exhausted. We'll handle it, he muttered. Family takes care of family. That's a lovely sentiment, I said. Wish you'd felt that way when Mia needed shoes. The next hour was paperwork. Signatures, payment schedules, account numbers. Rachel signed everything with shaking hands, her parents hovering like they could somehow rewind time through sheer force of will. When we got to the custody arrangement, Mr. Benson pushed forward another document. Mr. Carter is requesting primary physical custody, with Mrs. Carter receiving supervised visitation initially, transitioning to regular visitation after 6 months, pending family therapy compliance. Supervised? Patricia Whitman gasped. Rachel's not dangerous. She's financially abusive, Patricia Chin countered. She lied to her daughter for 8 months about their financial situation, causing psychological distress and forcing a minor into labor. That demonstrates poor judgment that warrants supervision until trust can be rebuilt. Rachel looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since this meeting started. Ryan, please. She's my daughter too. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I love her. Don't take her away completely. I'm not taking her away, I said quietly. You pushed her away when you chose a car over her welfare. I'm just making sure she's protected while you figure out if you actually want to be her mother or just someone who has a daughter. The words hung there, sharp and final. Rachel nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face, and signed the custody agreement. By the time we finished, it was dark outside. Everyone looked exhausted, beaten down by the reality of consequences they'd thought they could avoid. Tom wrote the first check right there, $450, like paying immediately could somehow earn back credibility. As we left, Mr. Benson pulled me aside. You handled this well, Carter. A lot of service members would have just exploded, maybe done something they'd regret. You kept it legal, kept it clean. Your daughter's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, I replied. She's the only reason I didn't actually file those JAG papers. He smiled. Between you and me, those papers wouldn't have gone anywhere. Financial exploitation cases are hard to prove when it's a joint account. But they didn't need to know that. I smiled back. No, they didn't. Walking out to my truck, I felt lighter than I had in months. The money would come back, Mia was safe, and Rachel would think twice before lying to anyone about finances again. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just systematic, thorough, and absolutely devastating to people who thought they could get away with betrayal. I moved out that week with the kind of military efficiency that comes from years of packing up your life into duffel bags and relocating to places where people actively try to kill you. No drama, no slammed doors, no theatrical speeches about betrayal and broken trust. I'd already had my moment at the Christmas dinner table, and honestly, once was enough. I found a two-bedroom apartment in a complex that looked like every other apartment complex in suburban America. Beige exterior, a pool nobody used in winter, a gym with exactly 3 working machines, and neighbors who minded their own business. Perfect. Mia helped me unpack, which mostly meant she claimed the bigger bedroom. Dad, you're never here anyway. You're always working. And spent 3 hours decorating it with fairy lights and posters of bands I'd never heard of. She set up her new guitar on a stand by the window like it was a religious shrine, and every night before bed, she'd practice the same 3 chords until they sounded less like a cat being strangled and more like actual music. The sound drove me insane in the best possible way. It was the sound of a kid being a kid, not a kid working double shifts to afford shoes. Dad, does this sound right? She'd call from her room, strumming something that was probably supposed to be a G chord, but sounded more like a cry for help. Sounds perfect, kiddo. I'd lie, because what mattered wasn't whether she was good at guitar, yet, but that she had the space and time to be terrible at it without worrying about whether we could afford strings. The apartment became our sanctuary. We developed routines that felt nothing like the old house with Rachel. Saturday mornings were pancake mornings, and I learned that Mia liked hers with chocolate chips and whipped cream, which was basically dessert masquerading as breakfast, but I was in no position to lecture anyone about nutrition after 8 months of eating MREs that tasted like cardboard flavored with regret. We watched terrible Christmas movies, the kind where a big city lawyer falls in love with a small-town baker who's secretly a prince, and made fun of the predictable plots while secretly enjoying every ridiculous minute. Dad, why do these movies always have someone who gave up their dreams to run a bakery? Mia asked one night, sprawled on our second-hand couch with a bowl of popcorn. Because apparently bread makes people forget about their law degrees, I said. It's very powerful bread. She laughed, that genuine laugh that had become more frequent since we'd moved out. Do you think Mom watches these? The question hung in the air. We didn't talk about Rachel much. Not because I'd forbidden it. I'd never do that. But because Mia was processing everything in her own way, and I'd learned in therapy that sometimes the best thing you can do for your kid is shut up and let them figure things out. Maybe, I said carefully. Your mom likes Christmas movies. Yeah. Mia was quiet for a moment. I miss her sometimes. Like, not the lying part, but the other parts. When she'd make those really good pancakes on Sundays. Before everything got weird. That's okay, I told her. You're allowed to miss the good parts and still be angry about the bad parts. Feelings aren't mutually exclusive. You can hold both at the same time. Rachel and I had started co-parenting therapy the week after the mediation meeting, which was about as fun as it sounds, sitting in a room with a therapist named Dr. Morrison who had the energy of a disappointed high school principal and made us talk about our communication breakdowns like we'd just had a minor disagreement instead of a complete implosion of trust. Rachel cried through most sessions. I stayed calm, answered questions, and refused to let her rewrite history into something where she was the victim. I made mistakes, Rachel said during our 3rd session, dabbing at her eyes with tissues that Dr. Morrison kept in a box labeled "Feelings are valid." I got caught up in having nice things. I wanted to feel successful, like I was doing well while Ryan was gone. I didn't think about how it would affect Mia. You didn't think about Mia at all, I corrected. That's the problem. You thought about yourself, your image, impressing your friends with a new car and designer clothes. Mia was an afterthought you'd get to once you were done shopping. Dr. Morrison intervened before this could turn into another argument. Ryan, I hear your anger. It's valid. Rachel, I hear that you recognize your mistakes. The question is, how do we move forward in a way that prioritizes Mia's emotional well-being? Moving forward looked like supervised visits at first. Rachel taking Mia for lunch at neutral locations like the mall food court or the park, with me sitting far enough away to give them privacy, but close enough to intervene if needed. Mia was cautious at first, answering Rachel's questions with one-word responses and avoiding eye contact. But slowly, over weeks, she softened. They talked about school, about the guitar, about nothing important. Building trust is like physical therapy. You start with small movements and work your way up to walking. The money came in weekly like clockwork. $450 every Friday, deposited into Mia's trust account like an apology paid in installments. Tom had apparently sold some stocks to make the payments easier. Lori had gotten a second job, actual employment, not just spending other people's money, at a retail store where she learned what it felt like to work for wages instead of living off family generosity. Rachel had started seeing a financial counselor, someone who could help her understand the difference between want and need, concepts she'd apparently never encountered before. As for Lori, she'd blocked her number after I'd refused her third attempt at, "Let's move past this and be family again." Moving past something requires acknowledging what you're moving past, and Lori seemed to think that time alone could erase the fact that she'd benefited from stealing from a 13-year-old. I blocked her faster than I'd ever blocked spam calls about extended car warranties, and felt zero guilt about it. One Saturday, about 3 months after we'd moved out, Mia came into the living room where I was attempting to assemble furniture from IKEA, which was going about as well as you'd expect for someone whose skill set involved stopping bleeding, not interpreting Swedish pictogram instructions. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure, kiddo." "Hand me the Allen wrench." "No, the other one." "Yeah, that one." "Do you think you and Mom will ever get back together?" I stopped mid-assembly, a bookshelf half-constructed and already listing to one side like it had architectural scoliosis. "No, sweetheart. I don't think we will." "Good," she said, and there was relief in her voice. "I don't want you to. I like it here. I like that you actually see me." At the old house, it felt like I was just there, you know? Like furniture Mom forgot to upgrade. That hit harder than any IED. I set down the Allen wrench and pulled her into a hug. "You were never furniture, Mia. You were always the most important thing. I'm sorry I wasn't there to make sure you knew that. You're here now," she said into my shoulder. "That's what matters." And she was right. I was here now. We both were. In an apartment with secondhand furniture and a bookshelf that would probably collapse by Tuesday. But we were together, and Mia was smiling again. Real smiles, not the tired ones she'd worn like armor at the diner. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting people back into your life. Sometimes it's about closing the door gently, locking it firmly, and building something better on the other side. 6 months later, life had settled into something that felt almost normal. Not the fake normal from before where everything looked fine on the surface while rotting underneath, but actual normal where problems were just regular problems like arguing about homework or whose turn it was to do dishes. Mia had her own savings account now, one she'd opened herself with money from her trust fund, and she was learning the difference between saving for things that mattered and spending on impulse. She'd bought herself a new guitar strap last week, purple with stars, and spent 20 minutes justifying the purchase to me like I was going to interrogate her about it. "Dad, it was on sale, and my old strap was getting worn, and I've been practicing every day, so technically it's an investment in my musical education," she'd said. Words tumbling out in that rapid-fire way teenagers talk when they're defensive about something they shouldn't be defensive about. "Mia, it's your money. You earned it by putting up with 8 months of lies and duct-taped shoes. Buy whatever guitar strap makes you happy. Buy 10 guitar straps. Start a guitar strap collection. I literally don't care as long as you're not financing a BMW." She'd laughed, relieved, and that's when I realized we'd turned a corner. She wasn't asking permission anymore. She was learning to make decisions and trust herself. That was worth more than any amount of money her mother had stolen. We'd established actual Saturday traditions beyond pancakes. Every week, we'd go to this farmer's market downtown where Mia would buy weird artisan honey and I'd buy coffee that cost more per pound than my combat boots. Then we'd hit the bookstore, where she'd disappear into the young adult section and emerge with books about teenagers saving the world while dealing with romantic drama, and I'd grab whatever thriller was on the bestseller list. Simple stuff. Normal stuff. The kind of stuff I'd missed while deployed. Rachel kept up with her payments religiously. Every Friday, $450 appeared in Mia's trust account like clockwork. She'd sold the BMW, took a massive financial hit on the lease termination, but that was her problem, and was driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that looked like it had survived several apocalypses. The furniture had mostly been sold too, replaced with more reasonable pieces from actual furniture stores instead of places that required appointments to shop. She'd gotten a job at an insurance company, Something with actual hours and a paycheck instead of just spending my deployment money like it was a trust fund. Our co-parenting had evolved from supervised visits at food courts to regular visitation every other weekend. Mia would pack a bag Friday afternoon, and Rachel would pick her up from school. They'd spend the weekend together, and Rachel would drop her off Sunday evening. The first few times, Mia had been anxious, texting me updates like she was reporting from a war zone. Mom made dinner. It's only slightly burned. We're watching a movie. She's crying again. She apologized for the 40th time. I told her I forgave her, but I need her to stop apologizing and just be normal. By month 4, the text stopped. Not because anything was wrong, but because things were getting normal. Rachel was learning how to be a mother who prioritized her daughter over her image. Mia was learning how to have a relationship with her mom that wasn't built on lies. It wasn't perfect. Rachel still had moments where she'd suggest expensive activities they should do together before catching herself and suggesting something free instead, but it was progress. The trust fund kept growing. $23,850 would be fully repaid in another 6 months, and after that, it would just sit there accumulating interest until Mia needed it for college or a car or whatever future expenses came up. She'd already started talking about colleges, looking at music programs and engineering schools with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from knowing you can actually afford to dream. Dad, did you know Berklee College of Music has a production and engineering program? She'd asked last week, laptop open to their website. Like, you can learn to produce music and record albums and everything. How cool is that? Very cool, I'd agreed, looking at the tuition costs and doing mental math. The trust fund would help, but we'd need more. Start looking at scholarships too. Your grades are good enough for academic money, and you've got the whole overcame adversity angle for essays. You mean that my mom stole my college fund to buy a BMW angle? That's the one. Admissions officers love a good redemption story. Just maybe frame it more gently. Financial challenges during parental deployment sounds better than my mother is a financial criminal. She'd snorted, but she'd also started a scholarship spreadsheet. My kid was going to be fine. Better than fine. She was going to be successful and happy and financially literate in ways her mother still wasn't. As for me, I'd settled into a rhythm too. Work at the base hospital, therapy on Thursdays. Turned out 8 months in a combat zone leaves you with some processing to do, and weekends with Mia. I'd started dating someone, a nurse from the hospital named Jennifer who'd heard the whole story and hadn't run screaming. You handled it better than most people would, she'd said on our 3rd date. A lot of guys would have just exploded and made everything worse. You kept it together for your kid. That's impressive. I wanted to explode, I'd admitted. But explosions don't solve problems. They just make messes other people have to clean up. When I thought back to that night, Christmas Eve dinner, the moment when Mia asked, "What money?" and my whole world shifted sideways, I realized it hadn't just been about the money. It was about trust, about priorities, about what happens when someone decides their wants matter more than their child's needs. The money was coming back in installments, but trust doesn't work that way. You can't repay trust in weekly deposits. You rebuild it slowly, through actions and choices, and proving over time that you've changed. Rachel was trying. I'd give her that. She showed up on time for pickups, attended Mia's school concerts, remembered important dates. She'd even started therapy herself, working through whatever had made her think a BMW was more important than her daughter's shoes. Whether she'd fully changed or just learned to fake it better, I didn't know. But she was consistent, and consistency was enough for now. One Saturday in June, Mia came home from Rachel's weekend and found me on the couch doing exactly what I'd been doing when she left, assembling IKEA furniture, because apparently I was a glutton for punishment and we needed a new coffee table. Dad, you're still working on that. It's very complicated Swedish engineering, I said, holding up instructions that looked like hieroglyphics designed by someone having a stroke. Also, I think they gave me the wrong screws, or the right screws for the wrong table, or I'm just bad at this. She sat down next to me, grabbed the instructions, and within 5 minutes had figured out what I'd been doing wrong for 2 days. Dad, you're overthinking it. See, this part goes here, then you flip it, then these pieces lock in. When did you become an engineer? When I decided Berkeley was my backup plan and MIT was my reach school. She grinned. Also, I've been watching YouTube tutorials. You know, like a person living in the 21st century. We finished the coffee table together, mostly her doing it while I handed her screws and pretended to help. When it was done, stable and level and not listing to one side like my previous attempts, she sat back and looked at me. Dad, thank you. For what? You built the table. Not for the table. For everything. For coming home and actually seeing what was happening. For fixing it. For not just yelling and making everything worse. For, her voice cracked slightly, for choosing me. I pulled her into a hug. This kid who'd grown up too fast and was finally getting to be a kid again. Mia, I'll always choose you. That's not something you need to thank me for. That's just being your dad. Still, she said into my shoulder. Thank you. And sitting there in our apartment with its secondhand furniture and its coffee table that actually stood level, I realized we'd built something better than what we'd lost. Not despite the betrayal, but because of how we'd handled it. We'd taken something broken and turned it into something stronger. Sometimes peace isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering it, learning from it, and building something new with the pieces that remain. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, being happy, and proving that what didn't kill you actually did make you stronger. Oh, and remember that knock on the door? Major Hastings showing up with official-looking documents on Christmas Eve? Best timing ever. Better than any present under a tree. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it just needs to show up at exactly the right moment and remind everyone that actions have consequences. Santa's got nothing on JAG paperwork and a father who refuses to let his kid down twice.